Home winemaking. Is it safe? When someone hands you a bottle of their hard-earned creation, do you know if what's in that glass is going to be safe to drink? This video is not going to discuss the possible issues that could occur from bacterial infections because the equipment wasn't properly sanitized. It's not going to be talking about mold issues that could occur during fermentation. It's not even going to talk about the effects of excessive drinking. What this video is going to talk about, it's going to talk about the effects, possible effects, side effects of botulism. That's right, botulism. Now, I should point out two things before beginning in earnest. One, I am not a doctor, okay? Most of my research, in fact, the bulk of my research is coming from the Center for Disease Control. You all know it as CDC. So with that having been said, let's get on with it. What is botulism? Also commonly referred to as Clostridium botulinum. All right, according to the CDC, botulism is a rare but serious illness caused by a toxin that attacks the body's nerves and can lead to paralysis or even death. It's that death part that piqued my interest in this, so we'll make sure that we got that base covered fairly well. All right, I'm going to read from this because there's a lengthy list. What are some of the symptoms of botulism? Well, some of these symptoms can apply to a lot of other things, but the CDC has it listed as double vision, blurred vision, drooping eyelids, slurred speech, difficulty swallowing, a thick feeling tongue, dry mouth, and muscle weakness. Okay, so just exactly how rare is botulism? And we're just going to limit our discussion to the United States. And according to the CDC, there are approximately 110 cases of botulism in the US every year. Now, approximately 70% of those cases are infantile botulism. Okay, a lot of kids are getting it. Don't know why, since all they're eating is baby food and breast milk. But they're responsible for the bulk of the cases of getting botulism. So if we've got 110 people on average getting botulism from all sources, then that leaves about 27 adults getting botulism, again, from all sources. So some of the sources of botulism can occur from, well, as we already discussed, infantile botulism. There's wound botulism, the foodborne botulism. That's really the focus of this particular video. There's, I'm sorry, that's one of those big words I have to actually look at. Iatrogenic botulism and adult intestinal botulism. I want to go back and read that iatrogenic botulism offline. In any event, those are some of the number of cases that occur in the United States, and we're talking 27 adults out of a population of what, 329,484,323 as of the last count of the census, 2020. Now that we got some of the scientific stuff out of the way, when on my wine channel, every now and then I'll produce a video and I'll see in the comment section, you're making Pruno, you're making jailhouse wine. I didn't know what Pruno was, and when they referenced jailhouse wine, I kind of like took them for their word for it because I never heard of it. But Pruno, as I did the research, was basically a cheap way to make alcohol from wine, basically. Common names for Pruno are hooch, prison wine, toilet wine, brew, and buck. There may be others, but those are the ones that are referenced the most. And some of the ingredients that it's usually made from are most of the ingredients that I use to make wine on my channel. We got oranges, apples. I just did a fruit cocktail wine, fruit juices, which is a mainstay of my channel. Haven't done one yet from hard candy, high fructose syrup. Haven't done that yet. Bread, did do that kvass, which used the bread. Potatoes and honey are some of the main sources that are commonly used to make Pruno. Now, Pruno is wine that generally is made within a week to 10 days. Okay, we're not talking about a long fermentation process. We're talking about something that will give you that quick initial fermentation where 70% of your alcohol is produced during that first 5 to 7 days, and pretty much that's as I understand it, that is what's being drunk. That is not what I do on this channel, because I usually specify at least 12 months before you crack open a bottle and partake of what you make. And you can find a link to all of this, all of my research. You'll find that in the description section of the video and probably in the initial comment section of the video as well. Now that we know what it is and we know how rare it is, what can we do to help limit or inhibit the growth of the botulism and its toxin? Well, again, it's generally accepted, certainly by the CDC, that if you have a pH level, the amount of acidity ranging from 0 to 14, if you have a pH level with water being in the middle of roughly 7-ish on that scale, if you have a pH reading of 4.6 or below, some are saying 4.5, but 4.6 or below, then you have created an environment where the Clostridium botulinum is in an environment where it really can't grow and fester. So you've created something that's more of a safe environment. So it's a bit on the acidic side. So again, now that we're talking about pH levels, what are the pH levels? Well, again, as I say, they range anywhere from 1 to 14, with a pH of 7 being completely neutral. As I said, water, more along the lines of distilled water, but water. A very low pH level, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're talking about something that has a bit more of acidity, and substances which are high in pH are considered more along the lines of being alkaline. The average pH level in wines is roughly 3 to 4. It'll range in that. It'll have that range. There's a different range for white wines, different range for red wines, but basically they both are coming in less than 4.0 on the pH scale. Now, to give you a better idea as to the pH level in some of the fruits that we use, and vegetables on my channel, that are used in winemaking, here's a list of about 7 or 8 that I could fit on the screen to give you an idea, kind of a range between some of the lower pH fruits and some of the higher pH fruits and or vegetables that are commonly used in making wine. We're leaving out the varietal grapes, your Merlots, your Zinfandels, and so on and so forth. Those are already going to be highly acidic, so this is more along the lines of home winemaking using country-style wines. Okay, so with that in mind, I decided to conduct 2 simple experiments. Okay, one, I'm going to take a gallon of regular filtered water and I'm going to put in a quarter of a lemon. I'm just going to squeeze the juice of a quarter of a lemon. And we're going to see how much that will have an effect before and after on the pH level of just your basic container of water. And then we're going to open up a couple of bottles of my wine that I made and just picked a few at random. And we're going to check the pH levels on those. And we're going to see if we can lower the pH levels in that water and or we can verify that the pH levels in the wine that is being made at home fall within a safe range. So let's begin with the water. Okay, let's conduct a very simple experiment. Let's determine if we can change the pH level of basically plain filtered water by adding a quarter of a lemon. And let's see how much of a change in the pH reading we can get from that. First thing I want to do is I want to pour off a little bit of our water. Now, remember, these are not exact measurements. Pretty much eyeballing it for the most part. If you want to repeat the experiment at home using exact measurements and much more expensive equipment than this, please feel free. All right, just by taking the initial reading of water, set that in there. Looks like I'm coming up with a reading of, if it'll steady out, I'm coming up with a reading of about 6.6, roughly 6.60. It's fluctuating around quite a bit. Yeah, let's go ahead and slice up our lemon. Now, Remember, on this channel, I use lemon juice as my acid blend substitute. And for the bulk of my videos, I now generally recommend using a quarter of a lemon to hit a pretty nice sweet spot in terms of providing some degree of acidity. So we'll go ahead and just take a quarter of a lemon and give it a real good squeeze. Again, we are not going to be that precise. We're not interested in how many grams of lemon juice we're putting in there, how many quarter of a teaspoon that we're putting in there. We're just going to give it a real good squeeze. And let's go ahead and incorporate that just a bit. Since we're in the process of incorporating things, let's go ahead and put our water back in, keeping it as close to the 1 gallon mark as possible. And let's go ahead and give it a mix. All right, it's good enough for this channel. Let's go ahead and pour off another measurement sample. Put in our pH meter. And let's see what kind of a reading we get this time. All right, looks like I've got a reading of approximately 3.64. Now remember, we needed to get under 4.5 in order to mitigate the effects of potential botulism occurring in our brew. And just by adding just a simple 1/4 of a lemon, never mind the acidity that's going to be in the fruit in and of themselves, which would bring the measure down even lower, just simply adding just a little bit of acidity is going to make our wine or mead safe. Now, I should also point out that I had planned on simply using pH strips to do this experiment, which I did do during the trial run. And once I realized that it succeeded, I decided to spend a few bucks, quite a few, for about 14 bucks worth, no, it was less than that, to buy a pH meter to help out as a visual aid for this experiment. In this testing, I want to test 3 of my wines that I've made and determine the pH level for each one of the 3. One, the apple mead that I made 18 months ago using the juice of half a lemon, which was my acid blend substitute. The other is a wild yeast apple wine that I made 12 months ago. I'll be doing a taste testing of that one shortly after this video. And the third was a muscadine wine that I made also 12 months ago, where I used no acid blend or lemon juice at all. And let's see what our readings are going to be. Oh, one other thing. Between each reading, I'll be cleaning my pH meter with distilled water to keep the results as accurate as this meter will allow. Now, starting with the apple mead, I will freely confess that yes, I have been drinking this. Actually, I started drinking this the day before and have plans on finishing this one up tonight. But we'll start with that one since it's already open. And let's just pour us a sample. And let's just take a reading. Okay, it looks like the reading on this one is coming in at about 3.7475. Now for our next sample, the wild yeast apple wine. And this is one that I made using actual wild yeast that I obtained from store-bought grapes, organic grapes. And let's take a reading on this. And it looks like this one is steadied up at 3.72. And lastly, this bottle of muscadine wine, which I really kind of hated to open up because when I did the taste testing of this one, it really was pretty good. I was kind of wanted to hang on to the 4 bottles of this that I had left. But for the interest of this video, we'll take a reading. And this one is sitting up at 3.12. And this was not using any acid blend or lemon juice at all. Now, these are just 3 bottles that I picked out at random, basically using apples, and muscadine grapes as my fruit of choice for each one of these bottles. And as you can see in this modest example, my pH readings came in well below that necessary for botulism to thrive. So with regards to at least these 3 bottles, if I hand one of these to a guest or friend of mine and they ask me, is it safe? I can honestly say, yeah, it is. Okay, as you can see, just based on some relatively simple, non-scientific tests, granted, these were not performed under ideal laboratory conditions, but nonetheless, even just the simple equipment that I used was enough to verify, to me at least, that most of the stuff, some of the stuff that I've made is falling well below the necessary mark of 4.5, 4.6 necessary for botulism to occur. So to answer the question, is it safe? Yeah, generally speaking, it is safe, as long as all of the other conditions have been properly followed. And again, those conditions were making sure that everything was properly cleaned and sanitized prior to your operations and actually during the operations, making sure that you don't have a lot of exposure to air, making sure that your pH levels fall within range. Now, generally, you are not going to see me taking pH readings. You're not going to see me taking pH readings on my channel. That's something that I can now do off screen. pH levels, pH readings, pH measurements. I'll leave those for some of the more advanced channels to put on their channels. I try and keep things as simplistic as possible, and making things as simplistic as possible, I also want to make sure that everything is as safe as possible. And there you go. This is my take on determining whether or not the wines that I'm making at home fall within conditions that will preclude the eventuality of botulism occurring. So if you like what you see here, please click on the subscribe and notify buttons. Better yet, become a member. Better yet, become a Patreon to help support this channel. And I'll see you in the next video.